Welcome back, everyone, to the 3 Minutes on the Clock podcast. This is episode 6 of the series. I appreciate all the support that we've got on it so far, and this is my 4th NFL mock draft. The first 3 have all received over 10,000 views, so thank you all who tuned in, watched, and subscribed because of them. So my plan was to upload the defensive big board today. However, we're so close to 1K subs. I want to say we're 52 away. And mock drafts get me a ton of subs. So I'm hoping that with me uploading this today, I can get to 1K a little bit faster. Maybe we'll get it at the end of a week. Maybe we won't. We'll see. And then next weekend, I plan on doing the defense big board. So that is the plan. This mock draft is just like the last one. 2 rounds, no trades. My next one might have trades, or it might be 3 rounds. Not entirely sure yet, but let's get right into it. With the first pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Nick Bosa, edge rusher, Ohio State. This is the same pick I had in my last mock draft. Bosa will be going to Arizona. I don't think this is a home run pick for the Cardinals because I think that they could go with some other players, maybe a Quinnen Williams. Maybe if Ed Oliver has a phenomenal combine, he can get his stock back to that top 5, top 3 range. But right now, this is Bosa's selection to lose. Him alongside Chandler Jones will be a really deadly pass rush. Now what the Cardinals need to do is get some interior presence on their defensive line. And then they're going to have a scary unit going after the quarterback. With the second pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Josh Allen, edge rusher, Kentucky. This is another pick that I had in my last mock. I think this makes a lot of sense for San Francisco. They have a lot of talent in their front 7. However, they are in need of some edge rushers. They have good players in the interior of their defensive line in DeForest Buckner and Solomon Thomas. Eric Armstead isn't really a true edge rusher. I'd say he's more of a run-stopping end or a hybrid type of defensive tackle. However, since Armstead isn't really an edge rusher, since Solomon Thomas and DeForest Buckner aren't really edge rushers, they don't have that guy who can get to the quarterback, which is why I think they need to go with Josh Allen. He's one of the best pure pass rushers in this draft class. Lots of production for the Kentucky Wildcats this season. He won SEC Defensive Player of the Year over a number of really talented players such as Quinnen Williams, Devin White, etc., and I think this is a good pick for San Francisco. With the third pick, the New York Jets select Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle, Alabama. Quinnen Williams is one of the more dominant interior presences in this draft class. Very athletic, lots of college production for the Crimson Tide. And I think the Jets could use someone to improve their defensive line, get someone alongside Leonard Williams, another interior disruptive presence. And I think Quinnen and Leonard Williams can have a really good foundation for the Jets' defensive line. With the fourth pick, the Oakland Raiders select Clelin Ferrell, edge rusher, Clemson. Now, before I talk about this pick, I know the first 4 picks are the exact same top 4 from my last mock. I added Bosa, Allen, Williams, and Ferrell. I promise there are not very many duplicate picks left in this mock. I believe there are only 3 more in the first round that were the same from last mock draft to this one. So you won't be seeing a lot of the same picks. But anyway, I think this makes a ton of sense for the Oakland Raiders. Obviously, they did lose Khalil Mack via the trade, so I think they need someone on the edge to disrupt the quarterback. The Raiders did not have a good pass rush a year ago. They have some talent at defensive tackle in Mo Hurst, P.J. Hall. However, they don't really have talent anywhere else on their defense, and I think that's what they need to focus on here in round 1. The fifth pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Jonah Williams, offensive tackle, Alabama. In all 3 of my previous mock drafts, I've had Greedy Williams to the Bucs, but now I have them going with a different Williams in Jonah. I think this makes sense for the Bucs as they want to improve their offense for famous Jameis, improve the offensive line. Donovan Smith is a free agent, an unrestricted free agent this season, and DeMar Dotson is not getting any younger, so I think they do need to improve at the offensive tackle position, and I think Jonah Williams absolutely does that. He's been very good for the Crimson Tide, one of the main reasons why their run offense has been so effective the past few seasons. The 6th pick, the New York Giants select Cody Ford, offensive lineman, Oklahoma. A lot of people are probably questioning this. Many people think it should be Dwayne Haskins, and I do think the Giants need to add another quarterback to the roster. Maybe Eli Manning can start this season, but I think this has to be the last season that Eli starts, or they get a new starter. So the pick could be Dwayne Haskins. However, their offensive line is so bad that they need to go offensive line early, and Cody Ford is a very good player. I've had him going to the Eagles in all 3 of my mock drafts, so going from pick 25 to pick 6 is a huge jump. I understand that, but the Giants know they need offensive line badly. I don't think this is too much of a reach. I really like Cody Ford. He is my number 2 graded offensive lineman in this draft behind Jonah Williams. And I think the best thing about Cody Ford is his versatility. He can play tackle and he can play guard, which the Giants could use both. Their left tackle, Nate Solder, did not have a good season. Their left guard, Will Hernandez, is solid, but when you look on the right side, which Cody Ford primarily played on Oklahoma's right side of the line, I want to say their starters are John Jerry and Bobby Hart, neither of whom are good at all, so Cody Ford can make an immediate impact, and I really like his upside as well. I think this is a phenomenal pick for the Giants, as long as they can get a quarterback later in the 2nd or 3rd round, or sign someone. With the 7th pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Dwayne Haskins, quarterback, Ohio State. My last mock draft was the first time I did not have Haskins going to the Jaguars, as I did have him going to the Giants, but now he will become a Jaguar in this mock draft. Obviously, Blake Bortles is no longer the answer for the Jags, and they will be getting a new quarterback. I expect them to draft someone in the 1st round. There's a good chance they do trade up, but since there are no trades in this mock, they're not trading up. Shocker, shocker. They could sign someone, and even if they do sign someone, like a Tyrod Taylor caliber player, I still think it makes sense to draft a quarterback, and with Haskins on the board as the clear number 1, in my opinion, I think they have to pull the trigger. The 8th pick, the Detroit Lions select Devin White, linebacker, LSU. In all 3 of my previous mock drafts, I've had Rashawn Gary mocked at this spot. And if you guys don't know, I am a Lions fan, and I'd be happy with either one of these picks. I think Rashawn Gary does make a little bit more sense. However, I think it's more likely that the Lions do pick Devin White, just because I do think most scouts do have him higher on their draft boards than Rashawn Gary. And I do like Devin White as a prospect more than Gary, but I think the fit makes sense for Gary. However, this is what I think will happen, not I think should happen. That's how I do these mock drafts, if you don't know. And Devin White, he is a phenomenal linebacker. I think him and Jarrad Davis would make a great tandem for the Lions. If Davis can improve his consistency, I think that these two can complement each other very well. And I think this Lions defense can get better and better with a good offseason and a good draft. With the 9th pick, the Buffalo Bills select Ed Oliver, defensive tackle, Houston. I think the Bills could use that interior presence on their defensive line now that Kyle Williams is gone, and Oliver brings that. He's a little bit undersized, but we've seen undersized defensive linemen like Aaron Donald succeed in the NFL. Oliver is excellent against the run, needs to work on his pass rushing abilities, but he's so athletic and he has so much potential that this could be a steal for the Bills at 9. The 10th pick, the Denver Broncos select JAWAAN Taylor, offensive tackle, Florida. A lot of people have had the Broncos going with a quarterback, and now that they've traded for Joe Flacco, they could still go with a quarterback, but I think it makes sense to improve on the offensive line. The Broncos don't really have a set player at right tackle, which is where JAWAAN Taylor would play. Taylor is very agile, very athletic. I do think he is somewhat raw, but I like his upside. The 11th pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Greg Little, offensive tackle, Ole Miss. So in my last mock draft, I only had 1 offensive lineman in the top 17, and now there are 4 in the top 11. The Bengals know they need to improve on their offensive line, as it is one of the worst units in the NFL, and I think Greg Little will be a pretty good player right away, and at the same time, he also does have a lot of upside and potential. I think this makes a ton of sense for the Bengals, as it's probably their biggest need. That and linebacker, and there aren't many great linebackers available, so I think this pick makes a ton of sense. The 12th pick for Green Bay Packers select Montez Sweat, edge rusher, Mississippi State. This is my first duplicate pick from the last mock. Sweat had a phenomenal Senior Bowl and a really good season for the Bulldogs, and the Packers absolutely need an edge rusher. They need to get to the quarterback, which is something that they have been struggling with. They need to improve their defense, and they have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but without a good defense, he can't take them anywhere. With the 13th pick, the Miami Dolphins select Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle, Clemson. I know a lot of people think a quarterback would probably fall here, but I think the Dolphins probably will sign someone, and they can get someone in round 2 or 3. And defensive tackle is a huge need. And with Christian Wilkins on the board, he had a very productive career of the Clemson Tigers, one of the most feared players in all of college football. The Dolphins need help in the interior of their defensive line, and Wilkins makes a ton of sense, with there being a decent amount of quarterbacks projected to go in the 2nd and 3rd round, or they could always trade up late in the 1st round to get a Drew Lock or Daniel Jones if one or both are still available. The 14th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Greedy Williams, cornerback, LSU. I don't think I've ever seen Greedy Williams mocked to the Atlanta Hawks, but I think this pick makes sense. Williams is a very tall, lean cornerback, and he's a very good player. Have him alongside Desmond Trufant, and that is a really nice 1-2 pairing, as Robert Alford won't be on the team next year, Brian Poole likely won't be on the team next year, and Desmond Trufant has a long list of injury history, so grabbing a corner high in the draft like Greedy Williams, and the fact that he's on the board, I think Atlanta has to make this pick, and I think it's a very good one. With the 15th pick, the Washington Redskins select Kyler Murray, quarterback, Oklahoma. The Redskins absolutely need to go with the quarterback. Alex Smith might not ever play a game in the NFL again, and their starter after him would likely be Colt McCoy. He's a solid backup, but he's also coming off a broken leg. So the Redskins need to go with one early, and while I think it's more and more likely that Daniel Jones or Drew Lock go ahead of Kyler Murray, because Murray seems very wishy-washy on his decision to play baseball or football, I think it makes sense for the Redskins to choose Murray over them, just because the Redskins are the definition of mediocrity. They're too average, they're not exciting, and they're not, oh wow, we're playing the Redskins, we have to really game plan super hard against them. But with a player like Kyler Murray, who's super explosive, he'll get fans in the seats, and he will make defensive coordinators have to work during the week to game plan against this Washington Redskins team. I think this makes a ton of sense, and if the Redskins get Kyler Murray, they should be very excited. The 16th pick, the Carolina Panthers select DeAndre Baker, cornerback, Georgia. The Panthers could use this pick in a number of ways. However, I had them going with Baker, who won the Jim Thorpe Award, essentially meaning that he had a very productive season for the Georgia Bulldogs, best defensive back in college football, and Carolina could use some help at corner. They have Dante Jackson, who they picked last year in the 2nd round. He had a very good rookie year, and you have a few guys behind him like James Bradbury, but they need someone else, and DeAndre Baker is a really good player who should contribute early. The 17th pick, the Cleveland Browns select Rashawn Gary, defensive lineman, Michigan. I'm not sold on the fit, however, this is such a good value pick that I think the Browns should go with it. Not sure where Gary will play in the next level. He would be an undersized defensive tackle, but he'd be a very large edge rusher, and I think he could play both of those positions. I like his versatility. The Browns definitely need D-tackle more, as outside of Larry Ogunjobi, they don't really have much there. But at their edge rusher spots, they have guys like Myles Garrett and Emmanuel Ogbah. Ogbah is sort of a question mark, but they need to work on their defensive tackle spot more. So I think it makes sense to have Gary play inside. Gary is the type of player who creates a lot of double teams and mismatches, which leads for more opportunities to get to the quarterback for guys like Myles Garrett, which I think this pick does make sense in that regard. The 18th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Andre Dillard, offensive tackle, Washington. If you've been watching these mock drafts, then you know the common theme that the Vikings need offensive line. Last time, they had Jawan Taylor, Cody Ford, and Greg Little on the board, but this time, none of them are here, so they go with the next best thing, which is Dillard, who had a very solid Senior Bowl. Should start right away at one of the tackle spots, with the other tackle being Brian O'Neill, who's entering his second season, and O'Neill, Dillard, Elfline, and the player who I have them going with in the second round, which, hint, is an offensive lineman. The Vikings O-line is starting to become more respectable. With the 19th pick, the Tennessee Titans select Ja'Kai Polite, edge rusher, Florida. I think the Titans could use this pick on defense, which I think makes the most sense. They have a number of interesting spots on defense, but I think edge rusher makes the most sense. Brian Arakpo probably won't be back. I don't know if Derek Morgan is still on the roster, but I think it makes sense to go with someone alongside Harold Landry, who had a really solid rookie season, and I think Polite is definitely the best one available. Polite had a very good season at Florida, however, this year was really his only productive year, so that sort of leaves a little bit to be desired, but he was dominant at getting to the quarterback for the Gators, and I think adding another pass rusher with Landry makes a ton of sense for the Titans. With the 20th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Byron Murphy, cornerback, Washington. This is a duplicate from the last mock. I think this makes a ton of sense for the Steelers, as Byron Murphy is my number 2 corner in this draft class. I really liked the way he played this year at Washington. Very productive, hard worker, very high IQ player, and the Steelers need another corner, as Artie Burns was not very good last year. Who else do they have, like Ross Cockrell? Is he still on the Steelers? I'm not sure. They need to improve their secondary, especially corner, and with Byron Murphy, head and shoulders the best one available, I think it makes a ton of sense. With the 21st pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Zach Allen, edge rusher from Boston College. The Seahawks, I think they need to improve their edge rushing. Frank Clark had a phenomenal season, but he is an unrestricted free agent. I don't know how much the Seahawks are willing to pay him. And other than that, they don't really have much. They lost Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill last year. So I think the Seahawks definitely need to get someone else who's going after a quarterback. And Zach Allen, I think he's been very slept on. I could see him going in the mid to late first round. And I think this is solid value for Seattle. Not home run value, but I think this is pretty good value for Zach Allen. And it definitely fits a position of need. The 22nd pick, the Baltimore Ravens select DK Metcalf, wide receiver, Ole Miss. The Ravens need to get a wide receiver for Lamar Jackson to help him become a better passer. Metcalf is a boomer bust prospect. I think he's either going to be really good or really bad. He can make big plays. He's very solid in the red zone. My only problem with him is obviously the injury history. He has a lengthy injury history. I know he missed a decent amount of the season, I want to say because of a neck injury, and that is a huge risk. They could go with like a N'Keal Harry, who I think is a much safer pick, but getting a big play threat for Lamar Jackson in DK Metcalf makes a ton of sense, whereas Harry isn't necessarily as much of a big play threat. With the 23rd pick, the Houston Texans select Dalton Risner, offensive lineman from Kansas State. The Texans absolutely need to improve their offensive line, as Deshaun Watson will easily get injured again if they don't. I'm surprised he was fully healthy throughout the season, and the thing I like most about Risner is his versatility. He can play pretty much anywhere on the offensive line, so I think this pick makes a ton of sense for Houston, as they're getting the best offensive lineman on the board and solid value, and obviously the position of need is there, as Deshaun Watson needs as many good offensive linemen as he can get. With the 24th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Deontay Thompson, safety, Alabama. What a phenomenal value selection right here for the Oakland Raiders. I am very surprised Thompson slips to 24, but with a lot of these other teams going with position of need rather than best player available, that's how this happens, and he falls in the laps of the Oakland Raiders. They need help at safety. I want to say they have Marcus Gilchrist at 3 safety. Don't quote me on that. They drafted Obi Melifonwu a couple years ago. That experiment totally flopped. And Carl Joseph, he's going to be entering his 4th season. He hasn't quite worked out, the way many people, including myself, expected. He showed a lot of flashes as a rookie, but has not played well at all the past couple of seasons. So I think the Raiders absolutely have to go safety early. And with Deontay Thompson, the best safety in this year's class, still on the board, it makes a ton of sense. The 25th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Josh Jacobs, running back, Alabama. In my first 3 mocks, I've had them going with Cody Ford out of Oklahoma. And if Ford were still on the board, I think he would absolutely be the pick here. However, since he's not, I think they could look at running back, as their main running back towards the end of the season last year was Josh Adams, who I liked coming out of college last year. I graded him higher than Rashad Penny, who went in the first round, and Adams was undrafted. But he can't stay as the primary back for a whole season, or else the run game's not going to be super pretty. J.J. probably won't be back. Darren Sproles' bones are made of glass. So I think it makes sense to get Josh Jacobs, who didn't get the most touches at Alabama, but when he did get the ball, he was very electric and should be the first running back off the board. The 26th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select N'Keal Harry, wide receiver, Arizona State. When I was talking about the DK Metcalf pick, I mentioned that Metcalf was a much big play threat rather than Harry, which is true. Harry does not have the upside that DK Metcalf has. However, Harry is much more polished. He has a very high floor, and while I don't see him as a superstar, he is my number 1 graded receiver in this draft class just because I know he will be good, and I think he'll be good early. With the 27th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Devin Bush, inside linebacker from Michigan. I think this is a small reach. I'm not saying Devin Bush is like a 3rd or 4th round prospect, but I think this is a little bit high. However, the Raiders' linebacking core is absolutely terrible. Last year, they had no interceptions, no fumble forces, no fumble recoveries, and no sacks combined. So they need someone who can play linebacker, especially middle linebacker, which I've said before is the quarterback of the defense. And Devin White, he is a leader on the field, which I think the Raiders absolutely need since they have a very young, very inexperienced team. And I think he can make a big impact right away since their linebacking core is quite doo-doo. With the 28th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Jerry Tillery, defensive tackle from Notre Dame. The Chargers have to take defensive tackle in round 1, as Corey Liuget just got cut. And even if he didn't, they still have to anyway, as the Chargers' defensive tackles are not starting caliber, I don't think. And they have 2 of the best edge rushers in the league with Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram. So getting someone good at defensive tackle who can create double teams and mismatches will make it a lot easier for Bosa and Ingram to get to the quarterback, and that makes the Chargers' defense a ton better. With the 29th pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Nasir Adderley, safety, Delaware. The Kansas City Chiefs defense is a mess, as seen by the AFC Championship, and getting someone like Adderley, who is playing for an FCS school in Delaware, but the Blue Hen safety has definitely been a very good player for Delaware, and his stock has certainly risen the past couple of months. While Eric Berry's great, he's had a lot of trouble staying on the field with injuries, and they need another safety alongside him anyway, so I think this pick makes a lot of sense. The 30th pick, the Green Bay Packers select T.J. Hawkinson, tight end, Iowa. Hawkinson's a very well-rounded player. He's pretty good at everything. Not particularly high on his ceiling, however, but I do expect him to be the number 1 tight end off the board. Jimmy Graham was not great this past year for the Packers, so I think it does make sense to get themselves another tight end, which a good tight end for Green Bay would do wonders for their offense. With the 31st pick, the Los Angeles Rams select Jalen Ferguson, edge rusher, Louisiana Tech. The Rams could trade this pick down, or I think they could go corner, but I had them going with an edge rusher. I don't think Dante Fowler is going to be back in a Rams jersey next year. He made a few costly penalties in the Super Bowl, and overall isn't that phenomenal of a player. Ferguson has had a very good career with Louisiana Tech, and the Rams don't really have an official edge rusher, as Samson Ekubom, I view him more as a coverage linebacker, and then Michael Brockers and Aaron Donald are playing the end spots since they are a 3-4. While Brockers and Donald are very good, they are more of 3-4 ends, 4-3 tackles, and I wouldn't really classify them as edge rushers, so I would assume Jalen Ferguson might play outside linebacker, which would basically be edge rusher in this situation. And I think it sort of fits a need if they get rid of Fowler, who mainly gets to the quarterback. That's what Ferguson does. And I think this pick makes sense for the Rams. The 32nd pick, the New England Patriots select Drew Lock, quarterback, Missouri. With Daniel Jones and Drew Lock both falling, the Patriots have a choice with both of them still on the board, or they could do something else with the pick. But since they're both there, I think New England thinks that they have to get one, and I've been going with Drew Lock from Missouri. Lock has had an up-and-down career with the Tigers, but it's been a productive starter a lot longer than Daniel Jones has. Lock is a very well-rounded player. He's an accurate quarterback. He has a solid arm. He's not going to be a superstar, but I think he's also has a very high floor, which for a team with as good of coaching and talent as they have, I think that makes sense. With the 33rd pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle, Mississippi State. Simmons has had a number of off-the-field issues and was not invited to the NFL Scouting Combine. And to make matters worse, this week he tore his ACL, so that's 2 red flags. However, he is a top 10 talent, and the Cardinals, with the amount of holes they have on their roster, I think it's worth it to take a risk because they don't have a lot of great players. And a defensive line of Chandler Jones, Jeffrey Simmons, and Nick Bosa, that is a really scary defensive line. With the 34th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Jauan Jennings, I think that's how you say his first name, from Vanderbilt. The Colts are in a weird spot with corners, as Kenny Moore II, he showed flashes. Quincy Wilson, who was a pretty high pick in the second round, showed flashes. I think Nate Hairston at times has even showed flashes, but none of them look like set guys who you know are going to be good. So I think the Colts could use a corner in this spot, and Jennings' draft stock has risen quite a bit these past few weeks, and I think this is a pretty solid pick for Indy. The 35th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Marquise Brown, wide receiver, Oklahoma. I've had Brown going to Oakland in all 3 of my mock drafts in the first round, but now he's here in the second round with the Raiders on the clock, and I think they have to pull the trigger. Get themselves a deep threat for Derek Carr. Brown is one of the fastest players in this draft class, very similar to a Deshaun Jackson, and someone who can dash down the field. He can make big plays, and I think the Raiders offense needs an identity with someone who can stretch the field. With the 36th pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Mack Wilson, linebacker, Alabama. The whole Reuben Foster situation definitely didn't work out, so they're going to need another middle linebacker to complement Fred Warner, and I think that can be Mack Wilson. He's been a very solid player for the Crimson Tide, and I think this pick makes a ton of sense. With the 37th pick, the New York Giants select Daniel Jones, quarterback, Duke. So somehow, Jones is available here in the second round. The Giants didn't get a quarterback in round 1, and with him here, they know they have to pull the trigger, as Jones is regarded by many scouts as a first-round prospect. He had a very good bowl game against Temple, showed that he's a leader, he's a winner, and obviously the Giants don't have their long-term quarterback on the roster, so I think this is a home run selection for New York. 38th pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Amani Oruwariye, cornerback, Penn State. We saw some Jalen Ramsey trade rumors during the season, and if he is a locker room cancer, as we think he is, and if the Jaguars trade him, they need to get another cornerback alongside A.J. Boye and Oruwariye here in the second round. I think this is pretty solid value. The 39th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Kelvin Harmon. Don't know why that took so long to say. Wide receiver, NC State. I think the Bucs could use another receiver alongside Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, who I think are a pretty nice duo for Jameis Winston, but it doesn't hurt to get a third guy. It's Adam Humphries. I'm pretty sure he's a free agent, so they need to get that third player to Jameis to throw the ball to, as if corners focus on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, if they don't get another good receiver, who's Jameis going to throw the ball to? And not to mention, Deshaun Jackson wants out of Tampa Bay, so I think this pick makes sense. It fits a need, assuming Humphries and Jackson go. The 40th pick, the Buffalo Bills select A.J. Brown, wide receiver, Ole Miss. Brown is a very polished receiver. He has good hands, he's a good route runner, and like N'Keal Harry, he doesn't have the most upside, but he's going to be a good player right away, which I think is important for Josh Allen, as outside of Zay Jones, the Bills don't have any reliable receivers, so I think this is good value, and it fits a need. The 41st pick, the Denver Broncos select Dexter Lawrence, defensive tackle, Clemson. Sort of similar with the Jerry Tillery pick earlier in the first round. The Broncos have two very good edge rushers in Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. If they can get that interior presence to have less of a focus on Miller and Chubb, then the two of them can get to the quarterback a lot easier. Lawrence is a big fella, very athletic, and I think he will use that to help the run game and help those two get to the quarterback. The 42nd pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Noah Fant, tight end, Iowa. Fant is one of my favorite players in this year's draft class. I love his ceiling. I love his athleticism. And Tyler Eifert has so much injury history, and he's an unrestricted free agent. I don't see Cincinnati paying him the money. So they need themselves a new tight end, and I think Noah Fant will be one of the best tight ends in the NFL in a few short years. The 43rd pick, the Detroit Lions select Brian Burns, edge rusher, Florida State. The Lions need to improve on getting to the quarterback. Their best pass rusher, Ezekiel Ansah, will likely not be on the team next year as he is a free agent. And Brian Burns is a very solid player, very solid value for pick 43. And as a Lions fan, I'd be pretty happy about this selection. The 44th pick, the Green Bay Packers select Yadni Kajuste, offensive tackle, West Virginia. This is the same pick I had in my last mock draft. David Bakhtiari is one of the best tackles in the NFL, but Brian Bulaga, the other tackle on the Packers line, he's a decent player, but he's not getting any younger, and he has an injury history. So I think getting Kajuste, even if he redshirts for a year, this still could be a really good pick. The 45th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select DRE'MONT Jones, defensive tackle, Ohio State. The Falcons have to get a defensive tackle. Whether or not Grady Jarrett does come back or not, they're going to need someone next to him. And if they don't bring him back, they're going to need two quality players there. So getting one in DRE'MONT Jones, I think they have to do it, and it makes a ton of sense. With the 46th pick, the Washington Redskins select Trayvon Mullen, cornerback, Clemson. Mullen's been very productive for his Tigers, and he was very good in the national championship. The Redskins need to improve their secondary. They could go safety, as Clinton Dix might not be re-signed and DJ Swearinger was cut, but I think they could go cornerback as well, and Mullen is pretty good value for pick 46. The 47th pick, the Carolina Panthers select Elgton Jenkins, center, Mississippi State. Now that Ryan Khalil has officially retired, the Panthers need to get a new center, and Jenkins is really the only center who I expect to be picked in the top 2 rounds, unless you play someone like Michael Dieter or Dalton Risner there. The 48th pick, the Miami Dolphins select Will Grier, quarterback, West Virginia. Since I did not have them going with a quarterback in round 1, they need to here in round 2, and Grier is likely the best available on multiple draft boards. Not on mine. I'm not particularly a Will Grier fan. I'm not huge on his wonky throwing motion, and he has a somewhat weak arm. However, the Dolphins need a quarterback, and if they think Will Grier's good, pull the trigger. The 49th pick, the Cleveland Browns select J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, wide receiver out of Stanford. J.J. is a very well-rounded player. I like his skill set. Pretty good route runner, pretty good hands, and I think the Browns could use another receiver alongside Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway, and if you want to build around him, Rashard Higgins. With the 50th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Garrett Bradbury, center, NC State. I mentioned a couple picks ago that Elgton Jenkins is likely the only center who's going to be going in the first 2 rounds. Well, I forgot about Garrett Bradbury. So with Bradbury playing center, this will likely mean that Pat Elflein will be playing guard. Elflein can play guard and center, so there you go. The Vikings have 4 solid starters at offensive line. The 51st pick, the Tennessee Titans select Michael Diter, offensive lineman, Wisconsin. The Titans need help in the interior of their offensive line, and Diter can play a number of positions, so I think this pick does make sense for Tennessee. With the 52nd pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Riley Ridley, wide receiver, Georgia. I don't expect Antonio Brown to be on the roster next season, so the Steelers are going to need to add another receiver. Ridley is one of the best route runners in this draft class, and I think the selection makes a ton of sense. The 53rd pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select David Edwards, offensive tackle from Wisconsin. Jason Peters is walking on his last legs, at least football-wise. He cannot stay healthy, and he's very old. He is still a good player, but he's probably going to retire this offseason. So the Eagles need to get themselves a new tackle, and they're going to go with David Edwards from Wisconsin. They have to do it. It's not a glamorous pick, but the deed has to be done. With the 54th pick, the Houston Texans select ROCKYA SIN, cornerback, Temple. This is, without a doubt, the best name in this draft class. I think the Texans need to add themselves another corner. Their secondary has some talented players. Tyrann Mathieu can play nickel corner. Justin Reed, Andre Hall, that's a nice safety pairing. But they need some outside corners. Kareem Jackson had a good year last year, but he's on the wrong side of 30. Jonathan Joseph is 33, 34 by now. Kevin Johnson's not that great of a player. So going with ROCKYA SIN here I think makes a ton of sense. 55th pick, the Houston Texans select Irv Smith Jr., tight end, Alabama. The Texans need themselves another tight end, as C.J. Fedorowicz was a very good player, but I believe he's not ever coming back due to concussions. They've seen some flashes from guys like Jordan Akins this year. I think they had another rookie tight end who was decent, but neither of them are the long-term answer there. So Irv Smith, very well-rounded player. I like him a little bit more than T.J. Hockenson personally. I think this is a really good value pick for the Texans. I don't know how I keep having Irv Smith fall to the late second round. I think he's a late first, early second round pick, and this is a steal at 55 for Houston. With the 56th pick, the New England Patriots select Hakeem Butler, wide receiver, Iowa State. I'm so used to saying Houston, aka the past two picks. But anyway, Hakeem Butler is a big play guy. What I mean by that is mossing, one-on-one coverage, good in the red zone. And the only guy the Patriots have that's a big vertical threat receiver is Rob Gronkowski, who I think will be retiring. So they need another guy like that. While Butler isn't a tight end, and Gronk is, and there's a pretty big difference with that. The Patriots could always play him at outside receiver alongside whoever else they find. I guess Chris Hogan for the time being, and then Julian Edelman in the slot. That's going to be really nice for Tom Brady / Drew Lock. The 57th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Oshane Ximines. I know I said that last name wrong. I need to figure it out, but at least I tried. The last time I just said Oshane, I think that's what I'm just going to stay with, because that's a really hard name. But anyway, the Eagles like to rotate in and out a bunch of edge rushers. They have some older edge rushers like Michael Bennett and Chris Long, who won't be there forever. They do have Josh Sweat, who I like. He was a 4th-round pick this past season. But they need someone else. I've seen edge rushers go very high in mocks for them. And while I don't think they need to prioritize it as much as other people think they do, I think this is a pretty solid value pick for round 2. And it doesn't hurt to get as much edge rushers as you can get. With the 58th pick, the Dallas Cowboys select Deebo Samuel, wide receiver, South Carolina. The Cowboys' receiving corps is in an interesting spot, I would say. Amari Cooper showed a lot of flashes last year and will likely be the primary #1 receiver for them for a while. They also have Michael Gallup, a player who I thought had a very underrated rookie year. But outside of that, do they really have any other young guys they can develop? Cole Beasley is good, but he's not young, and he has a very small body. He can suffer an injury quite easily. So I have them selecting Deebo Samuel, very well-rounded receiver from South Carolina. I don't think he has a bad floor, but I also don't think he has a crazy ceiling. and I think he will have similar production to what Michael Gallup had this past season. With the 59th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select Julian Love, cornerback, Notre Dame, so doubling down on corners in the second round. I know Colts fans are questioning me right now, but let me explain. Jojuan Jennings is good, Julian Love is good, but outside of that, I don't think they expect both Kenny Moore and Quincy Wilson to develop. I think the Colts probably expect one will, but probably not both. Wilson is still very raw, and he hasn't shown a lot of flashes for someone who was picked in the second round. While he was a raw prospect coming out of Florida, I think they could use one of their two corners as a trade piece, and I think I could see a team trading something somewhat decent for them. I'm not saying anything crazy, but with Julian Love on the board here at pick 59, solid value, not crazy value, but solid value. With the 60th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, defensive back, Florida. Gardner-Johnson is a very versatile player. He can play both corner and free safety. The Chargers could use another safety alongside Derwin James, who I think as soon as next year might be the best safety in football. But they could also play him at corner. While the Chargers have by far the deepest cornerback roster in the NFL, Jason Verrett can't stay healthy, and I want to say he's a free agent, and I'm pretty sure Trevor Williams is a free agent as well. So I don't know how much the Chargers are willing to pay them, especially considering they have Casey Hayward and All-Pro Desmond King. So Gardner can be used as a hybrid corner safety, which I think his versatility can certainly go to his advantage. The Chargers can use him in a number of spots, and I think he can be a very good player for the Chargers defense, which looks like they have a very bright future with a number of young potential superstars. With the 61st pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Eric McCoy, center, Texas A&M. Mitch Morse likely won't be back next year, and the Chiefs, while they have some talented players on their offensive line, they don't have their replacement for Morse. So going with Eric McCoy, I think makes sense. Maybe a little bit of a reach, but not too bad of a reach, I'd say. And it fits a need, once again, assuming that Morse is not on the roster next year. With the 62nd pick, the New Orleans Saints select Chris Lindstrom, guard, Boston College. I think this is very solid value at pick 62, with a decent amount of offensive linemen going in the second round. A little bit surprised he's not off the board yet. Funny story, when I was actually making my mock, I accidentally wrote his name down like 3 times to 3 different teams, and none of those teams were the New Orleans Saints. As if you don't know, when I make my mocks, I make a few changes afterwards, like not having Chris Lindstrom going to 3 teams. But I think the Saints could use help at guard. Andrews Pete is a player who I really like, but I want to say he's a free agent soon, and he does have a little bit of injury history. And I don't know how much longer former Detroit Lion Larry Warford's contract lasts. While they are both really solid players, I think Pete is versatile enough that you can move him to tackle. I guess left tackle, because obviously Ryan Ramczyk is solid at right tackle. So while the Saints don't really need a guard, I think they can figure it out and make it work. With the 63rd pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Chase Winovich, edge rusher from Michigan. The Chiefs need to go with an edge rusher in the top 2 rounds, I think, as Justin Ford, good quality player, but he's not getting any younger. He's sort of showing signs of regressing. And then D. Ford, also a very good player, but he was really only good this past season, and it just so happens to be his contract year, as he is an unrestricted free agent this offseason. And not to mention, he lost the Chiefs the AFC Championship by going offsides. I don't think the Chiefs are looking to pay him top edge rusher money, so I think it makes sense to go after one early in Winovich. And yeah, good pick for the Kansas City Chiefs, improving their defense, which obviously needs a lot of work. With the 64th pick, the New England Patriots select Jaquan Johnson, safety, Miami. This is one of my favorite picks in this mock because Johnson's a player who I really like, very hard hitter, very good against the run. And looking at the Patriots, they love to use a bunch of safeties. Devin McCourty, Patrick Chung, and Deron Harmon all get a lot of playing time for them. But Patrick Chung not getting any younger. Duron Harmon, not getting any younger. Devin McCourty, not getting any younger, and it seems like he's contemplating retirement. So I think the Patriots could go for some young blood in Johnson. That on the video. I hope you all enjoyed. Sorry if I seemed a little bit rushed during the second round, because I didn't go into as much detail as I could have. The next video will likely be, or the next podcast episode, which will be next weekend, that'll likely be talking about the big board for the defensive side of the ball, and then after that, either we will have NFL Mock Draft 5, or something to do with the NBA mock. So, hope you all have a good day, and yeah, peace.
Hey, man! Come on!